Welcome back to the next session on operations planning, scheduling and control. I, Dr. Sanket Charkha, welcome you for this fourth module on operations planning, scheduling and control. I have done my graduation and post-graduation in commerce. I have also completed my Masters of Business Administration from Savitribai Phule Pune University with the specialization into finance and operations management as a major and international business in minor specialization. I have completed my Masters of Philosophy and Doctor of Philosophy, that is PhD, from the Savitribai Phule Pune University in the stream of Commerce and Management. I have various certification and diploma and degree programs in terms of finance and other operations specialization subjects. I have a total teaching and academic experience of 9 years. I have published various research papers in national and international journals. Today, we'll be starting with the next module, that is module number 4 in terms of operations planning, scheduling and control. Now let's begin with our learning. In this particular session, we'll be understanding and dealing with the concepts of ascertaining schedule performance, the learning objectives. At the end of this particular session, the learners will be able to understand what do we mean by ascertaining the schedule performance, how do we define those particular terms, and what explain the role of various operations in ascertaining the schedule performance. Now let's begin with our learning. Initially, first we'll understand what do we mean by ascertaining the schedule performance. Ascertaining the schedule performance is a series or a sequence of activities in an organization which has been conducted during the process of operations or during the process of manufacturing. A schedule or other quantifiable techniques is determining the attainment of a certain performance in this specific time period. Whenever any operational activity is been undertaken, everyone tries to aim and see that whatever the activity that we are planning, it should be completed within this specified time period. That is, the goal or the target should be achieved as and when it has been decided. In case of a certain organization, we always do have a certain activities which is planned and which is actual. There is always a differentiation or deviation between the actuals and the standards, and hence ascertaining the schedule performance looks into those considerations as to how we create a match or the gap between the actuals and standards is been reduced. So for those particular consideration, various performance schedule parameters are being set, and when each and every single parameter is being set, we as an organization try to aim to achieve and complete those particular targets. Now let us understand what are the various project control techniques. The various factors or the techniques that one needs to control for the project performance are the control, the cost, the schedule, the performance, the change, and the risk. So these are the various factors one needs to consider for ascertaining how the performance of the organization is been going on. Now let us understand what are the various procedures or activities that have been performed in case of an ascertaining the schedule performance. Number one, tools for controlling the project schedules. So here in this particular slide, we'll understand and deal with the various steps that have been undertaken or the procedure that has been followed for controlling the project schedule. The first step that has been involved in these particular activities, performance reviews. So initially, we have to take the various reviews of the performances which are happened or which has already taken place in past. So ascertaining the performance reviews with respect to the previous activities is essentially important, based on which we can come to understanding a certain consideration as to what was the performance in the previous period and what is the projected performance in the future. So on the basis of few performance reviews, one can understand clearly as to what are the concepts of deviations and how do we implement those modifications in the current manufacturing system. The second factor or the procedure or activity that one needs to perform is the project management software. So in case of a project management software, one needs to establish and identify as to what are the requirements of a certain softwares, how do we implement those particular softwares in the business organizations, and which activities can be performed in terms of those activities and the softwares. The third procedure or the technique that can be followed is resource optimization techniques. In case of an resource optimization techniques, the major focus or consideration should be given on optimum utilizations of the scarce resources. The material, the quantity, the quality, the goods, the resources that we use or we consume in the day-to-day operational activities are always limited in nature, and hence optimum utilization of these scarce resources is essentially important. And for those particular consideration, the resource optimization techniques as to Lean, Six Sigma, Kanban, pull card, and so on should be adopted. And these particular techniques help to effectively and efficiently manage the resources in the short run as well as in the long run. And hence, for this particular constitution, resource optimization is essentially important. The next procedure or activity that can be followed at these particular stages, the modeling techniques. So in case of modeling techniques, there are various techniques that can be implemented which try to aim to see that how do we create a qualitative product in terms of quantitatives as a major consideration. So modeling techniques as to the implementation of quality standards in case of an increasing in performance in terms of quantity and so on. So the modeling techniques helps an organization to see that how do we minimize the control, how do we minimize the operational activities, and the better qualitative product is being created within a specific time period. So under the terms of controlling project schedules, modeling needs to be applied, which tries to simplify the manufacturing process or activities that has been undertaken. So in case of a shop floor activity, the modeling techniques helps the organization or the managers or the machines that have been installed to conduct the activities in a very sequential way. The next perspective or the tool or activities that needs to be undertaken is the leads and the lags. Lead time is a particular consideration wherein the time that has been taken for one activity to complete and move towards the second activity. So the breakup time between one activity and the second activity is called the lead time. The lag time is a particular activity wherein the duration that has been calculated in terms of either minutes or in terms of seconds is a part of a lag time. So every organization, whenever the product moves from one machine to another machine, one assembly line to other assembly line, it is always observed that the lead time and the lag time is completely different. And hence, with the help of the activities operations scheduling, we can easily identify and we can judge or measure what is the lead and the lag time and how a control on lead and lag time can be maintained. The next activity or the procedure that one needs to follow is scheduling the compression. So in case of scheduling the compression, one has to understand as to what activities are being scheduled, what activities are being planned, and how do we compress or how do we create certain activities in which within the specific time period, that is an actual or the desired time period, the activity gets completed, because it is ultimately impacting the performance, the quality and quantity of product that has been manufactured. And hence, scheduling compression is essentially important. The concept of scheduling compression focuses on the consideration as to what activities can be conducted within a specific time period, and no event or no activity is been repeated, and the time as to the part of wastage is not considered. The next perspective or the last activity or the procedure that needs to be undertaken for controlling the project schedule is the scheduling tool. So with respect to the various scheduling tools that are available in a business organization or with the help of various softwares, the various activity that needs to be performed should be controlled in an effective way, and accordingly, the results or outputs should be generated so as to see that the process or activity that has been undertaken is completed within the specific time period. Now let us understand what are the three types of scheduling that can be undertaken in a business organization, that is a manufacturing concern. Number one, the first type of scheduling is the capacity schedule. Number two, the second type of scheduling is the resource schedule. And number three is the services schedule. So in case of a capacity schedule, it focuses on what is the capacity and potential of that particular machine or a particular assembly line to manufacture a certain goods and services. So what should be the workload time for a certain machine or a consideration in which a particular scheduled activity can be completed within a specific time period. In case of second perspective, that is the resource schedule, in this particular consideration, the activities of a business organization are being planned according to the availability of resources. So let's take an example. In case of an accounting concept, we have the two terminologies, that is the LIFO method and the FIFO method, that is the last in first out and the first in first out. So the resource schedule identifies as to with what consideration the materials will be inputted to the organization. The last material that has been received will be delivered first, or the first material that has been received will be delivered first. So that is the concept of resource schedule that can be applied in a business organization. The next perspective that one needs to understand is the third type is the service schedule. Service schedule is a particular series of activities in which what service needs to be delivered to a particular machine or to an assembly line. So apart from a certain product, certain services or techniques needs to be applied based on which the scheduling activity can be completed within a specific or a scheduled time period. And such services that have been provided in addition to the product or in addition to the commodity that has been there under the process all such type of activities are called the services schedule. Now let us understand what do we mean by the operation plan, how it has been correlated with the operations scheduling and control. In case of an operations plan, it is always a plan which has been created to identify what will be the start date and what will be the finish date of a certain project or a certain commodity. Now, when a particular manufacturing activity is being undertaken with respect to a product or respect to a service or a certain commodity, one needs to identify as to when the project will start or when the activity will start and when that particular activity will end. So, the entire process of activities in which a plan of operational nature is being undertaken right from starting of certain manufacturing concern to the end of the finished goods, such plan or such activity or such schedule is called as the operation plan. The operation plan is very essential and important to track the delivery of the product within the specific time period. So at the end of this particular time period, whether the product will be available or not and it can be delivered within a specific time schedule, all those activities can be planned and understood with the help of operational plan. The Schedule Performance Index, that is the SPI, is a mathematical formula to determine whether efficiently a schedule will be followed or whether it will not be followed. So, on the basis of SPI, that is Schedule Performance Index, one can come to a conclusion as to identify that within specific what duration the process or activity will be completed and the delivery of the products can be completed within the specific time period or not. Now here in this case, every activity is either dependent or either independent of each other. But most of the activities in the organization or in a manufacturing concern are dependent on each other. With the output of one machine or one assembly line, the second output or the second input or the assembly line begins or commences. And hence, there is always a well and predefined schedule of activities which needs to be conducted in a certain series or in a certain sequence. And hence, the predecessor task always follows the successor task. And again, this particular cycle repeats or continues again and again. And hence, when all those activities are being planned in a certain organization, such type of activities are called as the operational plan activities. Now let us understand what is the application or terminology that have been used in terms of scheduling the performance parameters. Number one is scheduling monitoring. Number two is SPI, that is scheduling performance index. Number three is SPI calculation. Number four is critical path method, that is CPM. Number five is PERT, that is program evaluation and review techniques. And number six is starting with the baseline, which is BCWS. So these are the various applications or terminologies which can be used to identify as to how do we can implement or how do we can schedule the certain activities and their performance in the organization can be monitored and judged. So in case of schedule monitoring, activity can be scheduled and it can be kept under certain observations and it can be monitored very effectively. The schedule performance index is a particular index on the which basis we can come to a conclusion and identify what percentage or what performance or what level of performance can be achieved. So a certain standard and a certain actual or a budget is been decided, and on those particular consideration, the index has been calculated. The third perspective is on the basis of the SPI parameters or certain factors, the calculations can be undertaken with a specified formula and the SPI can be calculated. The critical path method and the PERT method are the various methods in which the various methods with respect to the movement of goods and services from one line to another line, one level to another level, one machine to another machine can be undertaken. So, goods and services which have been moving in the organization can either follow the critical path method or the PERT method, that is program evaluation and review techniques. And lastly, we have the starting with the baseline. So in case of the starting with the baseline, the activities that have been conducted in a business organization are conducted on the basis of certain standards that have been set, and no activity goes beyond that or below that particular standard line. Now let's take an example. So when you make an appointment with a certain doctor, so here in this case, what does he do? He gives you a certain schedule and he checks the respective schedule, and accordingly the appointment has been given for you. So accordingly, the doctor says that the clinic will open at 4 p.m. in the evening and your appointment is scheduled at 5 p.m., which means in case of this particular consideration, the time is being specifically given to an individual. So the time which classifies or which state that at what time your appointment will begin, your testing or your in meeting with the doctor begins, it identifies a particular schedule which says that now if on an average basis the doctor gives 30 minutes to each and every patient, so in this case what is the consideration that a doctor will provide first 30 minutes, that is from 4 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. to one patient, from 4:30 p.m. to the 5 p.m. to the second patient, and 5 p.m. onwards, the third patient, that is, you will be approaching and the doctor will treat you. So in this way, it identifies at what level or at what time the one class will begin and the other class will commence or it will end. So any timeline or any time based of events is called a part of a schedule. And here in this case, we need to clearly identify when the activity is going to start and when the activity is going to end. That is, it is going to close. So that's an example of a scheduling the performance indicators or parameters based on which we need to ascertain the plan or a certain series of activities. So a scheduled performance index is a metric that indicates how nearly a project is on a finishing time. So what will be the tentative finishing time of a certain product or a certain activity or in certain assembly line, and when this particular activity will be going to be completed. So that is a consideration of understanding the scheduled performance indicators or the scheduled performance parameters which can be implemented in a certain organization. Now, how it is calculated? It is computed or it is calculated as a ratio by dividing the budgeted cost of completed work or the earned value by the anticipated value. So, two values have been required, the budgeted value and the actual value. So, here in this case, when those particular two values are being compared as to what time is been undertaken, what cost has been incurred, and what task or the work has been completed, the ratio or the resultant figure will provide you the scheduled performance index, on which we can easily identify that whether an activity that was been planned has been completed within this specific time period or it has consumed the more time that as was been projected or as was been decided. Now let's summarize what we have learned in this particular session. In this particular session, we have understood what do we mean by ascertaining the schedule performance, what are the various plannings and the activities that needs to be required in understanding ascertaining of the schedule performance, and how do we implement and determine the concept of ascertaining the schedule performance in the business organization. I hope you must have enjoyed the learning in this particular session. We will continue with our learning. Thank you for your patience listening. Thank you.